Are you struggling to create an intentional headspace? Unable to connect deeper with yourself? Come, and together, let's address the elephant in the room. I'm your host, Sinead Roche, and this is the Uncomfortable Podcast. I think that there's sometimes situations where things are not your fault, like the actions of some things, how it occurred, the situations, how it just ended. They may not be your fault. Sometimes you just get caught in the middle of things, but it is your responsibility for how you react. I want to put a disclaimer out right now that this is not applicable, I feel like, for every single situation, what I'm going to say after this. And I think that, yes, definitely take into account your upbringing, your childhood, what triggers you had, what trauma. Definitely take that into account because you could be prone to just being more emotionally reactive than another person. And there could be other reasons for why that is. But I think in general, yeah, certain situations, I think just like the majority of them, they're not necessarily like our fault, but it is our responsibility how we react towards those. And moreover, I don't think that you can control your emotions, right? You're gonna feel what you're gonna feel. It's gonna come like automatically, like you just can't control it. Like, sometimes when you're saying to yourself, I'm not jealous, but you're jealous and you're jealous, you can't control those feelings, right? But you do get to control how much they impact you. And I mean that even mentally, physically, like what's your response to that? How much of your like mental energy is it taking like to carry on with these emotions? You can control how much they impact you. Again, in certain situations. And that's kind of what I want to talk about emotional reactivity today. And as I've said multiple times, I am definitely an emotional person. I'm going to say that. I lead by my emotions in many cases. And I think I've experienced a lot. I think I've experienced things. Let's say it like this. Everyone's experienced a lot of things. We're all in different situations, right? And in certain situations, we can't control how the people are reacting, right? But we do get to control how we react to those situations. And there comes a point where, you do have to accept responsibility for the actions that you take after that. And you can't, I feel like when you're trying to just like get better, when you're trying to just improve as a person, right? You can't use the fact that like someone betrayed you, someone cheated on you, someone embarrassed you as the reason for your reactions. I mean, you can in some cases, but if right now your goal is to work on being peaceful and work on being reactive, and my personal goal is to work on being less reactive, because TBH, I'm tired. I'm very tired of being like an aggressive person, and I'm tired of giving responses to things I don't need to give responses to. Then this matters for you. And that's why, like, if you like how you're acting emotionally right now, like if you like how you're reacting, I don't think this video is for you. But if you understand that you need to change in some cases and you want to become less reactive, then I think you should stay tuned in, because that was my situation as well, and I think I've grown a lot, hopefully. So first of all, let's discuss what it means to be emotionally reactive. Emotional reactivity, it happens when you have intense emotions, and these are usually triggered by external events. These events can leave you feeling like hurt, angry, defensive, and it's going to cause you to lash out and to act impulsively, do something or say something that you might later regret. And now these events they're caused by triggers, right? So when you're acting impulsively, something has triggered you. Now, what is a trigger? Trigger is something that is a stimulus that elicits a specific response. And one of the best ways that I've been able to I wouldn't say avoid my triggers, because that's just something you can't do in many cases. You can't control what's happening around you, but I would say, I think moving through my triggers, like the steps that took, and it's partially because of my dad. My dad told me write down when you're triggered. Like, he gave me like an exercise, and he's like, write down when you feel triggered, and like be able to identify your responses. And what that means is that pay attention to when you have these emotional or physical reactions. Like, what's happening when you're feeling like this overwhelming sensation of like, yeah, I want to bitch slap someone, or like, yeah, I want to say like something about your mother, I don't know. But when you want to just go off, right? Or even if you just want to lash out on yourself, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, too much external people or something like this, but just like when it's not working for you, what's happening. And then once you do, after like when you're able to identify what these situations are, you look back and you kind of retrace your steps. So reflect what led to these situations happening. Not situations, but reflect what led to these emotions, right? Is it something deeper? Is this a touchy subject for you? Is this pointing out an insecurity? Things like these, like, it's hidden in many of the situations that we're in, but in certain places, like, we can find them. And what you're going to figure out is that even after you've gone through like this exercise, in a sense, is that you're going to repeat this cycle. Like, you're just going to, it's not an automatic thing where you're just able to, one day I figure out this, like I get triggered because this points out the fact that like when I was a kid I was fat. That was something for me. And I used to lash out. I used to get really insecure. I'd feel really anxious all of a sudden. And now I just take it as a joke because I'm like, what do you mean? But that took time. It took time for me to actually be able to cope with this trigger and to have a different outlet for it and become less reactive towards it, in a sense. Okay? And moreover, let's talk about how do we actually deal with these triggers, because that's a huge part of being emotionally reactive, is like actually dealing with what's personally bothering you. And as I was saying before, learning to identify what are the steps that kind of get you there, like what's happening in the situation, when are you feeling overwhelmed, and kind of like memorize your reaction to that, like, and every kind of a sensation that you feel. Like, if I'm embarrassed, I'll feel so hot and like flush at the same time, and I'm like, and that triggers me to like then say something that's like stupid sometimes, or like be really mean in some cases. And so kind of just like memorizing what does that feel like, so that you at least know when you are feeling triggered, so that you can say, listen, I'm feeling triggered right now. Whatever is going to come out after this, it's not necessarily going to be the best version, right? Understand the feelings that you are having, and also learn to take a break. I think in certain situations, it's not possible to just leave it, but otherwise, listen, call 15 and be like, hey, I'm going to tap out right now because this is not working for me. Because whatever is going to come out of my mouth next is going to be hurtful, or like I might actually fight someone in some cases. Like, leave the situation. Because the goal right now, it's not to, I don't know, butt heads with what's happening at the moment. The goal right now is to become peaceful and less reactive, and to actually understand what you're feeling, and to be able to articulate yourself in some sense. And again, this is not for every single situation, right? And with that said, another like thing that you could be doing is like practicing mindfulness and just developing a grounding routine. As I said, like for me, it was like, I guess when I felt triggered, I did comedy in my head for certain triggers, but also a big thing for me was just being able to write down how I felt within that moment. And sometimes it was, let me write down everything I would love to do in this situation and then not do it. So that at least it's out there, that I've gotten it out of me, but I'm not actually like doing the action of it, right? And that comes with just like developing like a routine. Like, okay, I realize when this trigger happens and I'm triggered by this emotion, I'm able to, what's the easiest route to get me to calm myself down? Maybe it is walking away. Maybe it's like, I don't know, breakdancing in the middle of an argument or something like this. It could be silly, but if that is how you cope with it, by all means, go for it. Again, the aim for this is for you to become more peaceful in a sense and just less reactive as a person. Right. Now, now another thing that I want to talk about is kind of like self-regulation, because in a sense, that is what this is. Like, when you are trying to be less reactive, you are self-regulating yourself. You are emotionally understanding what is going on. And there's like 3, I guess, perspectives is what I'm going to say right now, how to go about it. There's the cognitive, emotional, and behavioral perspective. And so through the cognitive perspective, you can observe like what's going on with you, like how you're being really reactive for something like this. And you can also challenge those unhelpful thought patterns, right? So, for example, and this is like one that you might have on your own, if you're someone who has like a constant like negative thought pattern, right? Perhaps you're like by yourself and you trigger this by yourself, right? Perhaps you become like conscious enough to be like, let's actually stop this, right? And challenge it with like, I guess, a positive pattern of thought, like, hey, I'm good at this. Hey, I'm proud of myself for this. But just being able to, I think it's like just be conscious of what you're thinking in that sense. And I think that's like a weird situation to be in, especially like when you're the person who's causing your own trigger and when you're the person who's causing your own, I guess, anger, hurt, or any type of emotion. And I think for me specifically, that happens like when I'm thinking back to like a past situation where I was like hurt, betrayed, and I get angry at myself, and I'm like, and then I become frustrated with what I do, and I can see it in my behaviors and also the way I'm thinking about myself. And I kind of just like consciously stop that, and I'm like, wait a minute, I've done this, and this, just, it's kind of like a little quick checklist of like, hey, I was able to do this today. I'm really good at this. I don't know. Or like, I feel this way about, just like kind of changing about that thought pattern. Now, moving on to the emotional perspective, it's kind of just being able to notice your feelings and emotions, but not letting them take over. And what I mean by that is like, don't internalize it as much. But that comes with like putting boundaries up on yourself and like how much you allow certain thoughts and certain emotions really just like to get to you. And when you are in a vulnerable space, and I think most times when you are getting triggered, it is coming from something traumatic, like it's a vulnerable setting to be in. So that's why I literally say give yourself time with that. Like, yeah, feel the emotions, but don't let it completely like internalize, if you were embarrassed, that doesn't mean don't keep putting yourself out there or something like this. Just take it step by step and build yourself up a bit, build yourself back up again, and then go out there again, And then lastly, there's behavioral, right? And I think it's kind of the most obvious one, and that's where you're choosing intentional behaviors instead of like just reacting impulsively. Let me tell you something right now. There's a few people right now, which if I ever had the opportunity, I would love to run them over with a car. I would love to. And aside from just like being scared of jail, I don't know, I just don't want to be a reactive person anymore, like I said, but I don't know, like not all responses and not everything that people have done, it necessarily requires a response from you. And so instead of like, wanting to do my impulse and like hurting someone, like, which sometimes is the case, like, if your pride's been hurt, like, or if you're just like in a nasty fight with someone, you want to hurt them, walk away. Like in my situation, like I've walked away multiple times and I journaled. I don't like doing it sometimes, but if that doesn't work, then I physically get rid of it by exerting myself in the gym. Like that's one way at least to like get the aggression out of me. And I love that I'm able to cope that way because I definitely have avoided so many different conflicts that had I still wanted to give someone a reaction or had I still been so angry and like content with being angry and content with using the excuse that this person did this to me, then I don't think I'd have learned as much and grown to the person I am like this in this space. And I think I've definitely made more mistakes than I have already, But yeah, And as I was saying before, I think that like the statement that, okay, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility for how you react, right? In most cases, yeah, we are going to say that it is the other person's fault for the reason why we've acted like this, if it's a situation that you can't control and where like someone has hurt you or something like this. And that does mean that we are like, we're still accepting the responsibilities, and we're still accepting the consequences, right? But let's take that as another look as like in a positive set, that kind of you can also accept the responsibility and also take on like the pride that comes with just being less reactive and walking away. And I can't tell you how many times I've actually cried because of like, damn, like I didn't do anything. Like in the past me, bruh, I'd have said some nasty ass shit to a person. Like I'd have torn a person apart. And it wouldn't have mattered to me. Because I'd have been like, but this person did this to me. But now I kind of also get to accept the responsibility and accept the pride that comes with being able to walk away. And yes, it doesn't look as cool sometimes, and no, it's not as fun and necessarily satisfying. But it's satisfying for the person who I want to become, and it's satisfying for someone who, I don't know, I just don't want to give as many reactions, and it's just satisfying for the calmer version of me. So yeah, that's a bit on how to be a bit less emotionally reactive. And I think, again, if you've kept by now, I think you honestly, like, you know that you need to adjust your emotional reactivity. When you ask yourself if you can proudly accept your reactions to situations regardless of what that person did, and if you find yourself making excuses, like saying, yeah, but they did this, and again, I'm not saying it's for every situation, but if you find yourself making excuses and, you know that, like, those actions, I guess, like, they don't coincide with who you are when you're just, like, at your ground level, right? And I think you know it's time to make changes. Thank you guys so much for listening.